Meet Brandon. He looks just like any other sixth grade scholar. Happy, healthy, strong, and he is. Except when Brandon earned his school's Perfect Attendance Award, it marked the first time he didn't have to miss a day of school since he started kindergarten. 11-year-old Brandon Hayes is the oldest son of Sherry and Daniel Hayes, and Brandon's journey has been unlike any of his classmates. It has been an ongoing voyage of joy, pain, celebration, sorrow, tribulation, and triumph. A testament to a young man's courage and will, a mother's love, and a family's resilience in the marathon of life. This is Brandon's Run.
We have been on many journeys as a couple. We had several failed pregnancies. And of course, when we made it all the way through all 40 weeks of pregnancy, it was a beautiful time. He was the boy that would jump from one table to the next, never sit down, full of energy, non-stop.
He's gonna get you.
Always the leader. Always the leader.
Get through it, Brandon.
It started with Daniel was out of town, and Brandon's eyes started to look a little funny. I called Daniel and I said, his eyes just look funny. So Daniel says, just bring him into the pediatrician. She calls us back later that evening, and she says, Sherry, I need you to take him to the emergency room because his lab levels are really off. They too run some lab work, and they too agree that his lab levels are off. His liver enzymes are extremely high, but don't worry, this is just kind of an episodic hepatitis. His body will clear itself out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, with him not having any issues before.
Right.
They took it as if it was something that was really going to kind of clear itself up.
Because Brandon's activity level has not changed. Brandon is still Brandon.
I go ring.
Okay. And who else?
Auntie Potter.
Who?
Auntie Potter.
And who else?
Coming.
Carmen.
3 days later, he started complaining of severe stomach pains. So the emergency room again runs some more lab work, and they see that his liver enzymes are, I don't know if it was double or triple, I don't remember,
they've
but they were
escalated a good
extremely
bit
high.
more.
So the liver doctor comes in and says, you know what, we don't know what caused this, and really there is no other treatment other than transplant. We're not gonna need a transplant, my God, we are not gonna need a transplant. So then that's when they said, okay, we don't think we'll have to get this, to this point of a transplant, but since that's our really only treatment that we have at this time, we'll just put them on the list because should we need it, it goes to the person who's been on the list the longest.
Despite Sherry and Daniel's prayers, unfortunately, Brandon's health became progressively worse, increasing the likelihood that he would require a transplant.
We finally had a chance to sit and talk with the transplant surgeon. And, he's kind of going through the process of, what all will be involved when the day comes. I said, well, I'll volunteer. He can have, I'll do whatever you need. We're the same blood type. Let's do this. At that time, the transplant surgeon was like, yeah, that's nice, but we're gonna put him on the list.
And the thing is it had been six and a half years since they had a successful living donor transplant because they were having so many complications with it. They pretty much had really stopped doing it.
It got to the point where we didn't have time to think about it. He was number 1A on the transplant list, meaning for this whole Southeast region, he was in the worst condition. So we're in ICU, and,
There We're in ICU, and they call a meeting, like 10 or 12 surgeons sitting around a table, and we're at the head of that table. And they're pretty much telling you that if something doesn't happen quick, your son's about to die.
As Brandon's health hung in the balance, surgeons agreed that using Sherry as a living donor would be the best course of action.
And I was scared. And I asked for my mom to come with me, and she did. And then my mom had to leave me. And I didn't want to leave without my mom. And then my mom convinced me and told me everything was going to be all right, and I believed in her.
And when it got down to the night before she was going to go into surgery, she and I got in a corner of the room and we prayed. You know, we put it in God's hands. There was a calm, believe it or not, that came over both of us that is inexplicable.
It's just peace.
There was a sense of peace.
So at dawn the next morning, October 13th,
When I had left him, he looked so sickly.
Sherry walked out of Children's and across Clifton Road alone to Emory University Hospital.
Unless that liver works immediately, he's not going to do well.
But within minutes, that piece of Sherry's healthy liver began working in Brandon.
As soon as we restored blood flow to the liver, it looked beautiful.
Sherry wouldn't see her son for 3 days.
Anyway, he brings me over to the hospital. When I see Brandon, he's sitting in the bed, and he just didn't look happy. But that was okay because he was no longer jaundiced. So I could see that the surgery had worked. You know, once the surgery was over and we were in the healing place, we had a lot of time together, one-on-one. He and I were on this healing journey together. If he hurt, he would ask, Mommy, do you hurt? Does your stomach hurt? Or if I hurt, I'd say, well, how does yours feel today? You know, that was something that he and I only, it was just the two of us that could relate on that level. If he, you know, didn't like the scar on his stomach, it's okay, look at Mommy's scar. Not a big deal. This is something that we have together. So this picture here will always be one of my favorites because Bryson had just turned 1, and this picture is 1 month after Brandon's transplant. So to go from, you know, praying that his life is spared to now look at how happy and healthy he is here. And then, what was it, about a year into it, that we had our first bout of rejection, which is very scary, where, you know, you think your body's not accepting the liver, you know, and it would bring us all the way back to the initial crisis.
Coming back from a soccer game, and I was eating a peanut butter jelly sandwich, and when that happened, I threw up. And over the past week, that's been happening. So my parents decided for me to go to the emergency room. The doctors figured out that my liver transplant, it wasn't working, and they needed a new one, unless I would die in the next month.
Spent a couple of days in the hospital, and we realized, oh, okay, you know, you get an IV with some medication, and then you go home.
Brandon probably came home taking about 7 or 8 different medicines.
If not more.
And it was
That was tough.
That was tough because you
That's
could
the
only,
schedule.
there was the timing of it, you know, 2, 3, 4 times a day, whatever.
Yeah,
But
and in between going back to the hospital 2 to 3 times a week to check. But he always handled it like a trooper. Always, 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 always.
It's one of the things that you never get. Even though things have gotten better, you never get past. When you've had as many bouts of lapses as we've had,
You can't take it for granted. Even still now, this many years later, when I take Brandon to get his blood work drawn, because that's how they measure how well he's doing or not. Before I release those little vials of blood or tubes of blood, I lay hands on him and I pray over him. Still.
Since the initial surgery and first bout of rejection, Brandon has overcome 6 additional surgeries and other maladies that affected his health and ability to attend school. So in 2013, as Brandon was about to begin first grade, Sherry and Daniel chose a brand new school for Brandon, the Academy of Scholars.
It was going to be a small enough environment where we could still have that family feel.
They got to know the students personally. And with Brandon's situation, everyone was open and willing and always has been open and willing to adjust and adapt to, his needs and some of the challenges with him being in and out of the hospital or having to go for his blood work
And they've always been open to us as parents and our insight and our opinion. And, if we had a concern, they've always been open to listen.
I think it was an ideal situation. And from Brandon's standpoint, he was happy.
In spite of the challenges of having to be hospitalized for weeks at a time, Brandon maintained a straight-A average every school year and has now gone over a year without any additional setbacks and has even earned perfect attendance for the very first time.
Ever since the beginning of this process, we've wanted to do whatever it takes or whatever we could to prevent another family from going through this. And then we also want to be an advocate to say, hey, if you should find yourself in this situation, all is not lost.
It was a chance to give a testimony, where we were, what we came through, and basically what God has done for us, how blessed we are that he's still here, even though we've gone through he's here. That was something that I vowed to be a living witness and to be just, like I said, a testimonial. There's been a couple of things that come out of it. They've done numerous ones since then. And, we've been kind of catalysts for families that are going through the process and been there for them.
In order to raise awareness about organ donation and help provide financial relief to families who may experience situations similar to Brandon's, the Hayes family started the Brandon's Run 5K Run Walk.
It was actually a brainchild of a neighbor.
The Fearses, Michelle and Skip Fears.
She had a dream and she felt that she was charged to do this, to bring awareness to transplantation. They were always in awe of how Brandon has come through and hasn't skipped a beat. She asked our permission and just ran with it.
Yeah, and she wanted it to be, and we wanted it to be for a just cause. First thing that came to our mind was the Georgia Transplant Foundation, because this has no, economic hierarchy. I mean, it can happen to anybody.
Racial,
How many families have this challenge and don't have the finances to pay for the medical expenses? The cost of the medication is substantial.
What,
and
one medication for Brandon was $1,000 for
it's
1 month?
$800 and something dollars.
Yeah.
Where could we, from a financial standpoint, have an impact? And it was the Georgia Transplant Foundation, because they give willingly.
Sherry, thanks to your sacrifice, the lives of other children have been saved.
I hope and pray.
So what would you say to a mother or father who's going through the same thing right now?
Have faith. And you can do it. And all will be well.
You saved your son's life. You're a superhero.
And my mom